Hi and welcome everybody. Søren here from Burning Bridges. Today I have a special guest. We have Tony Davis from Team USA, and we're going to talk about the matchup process at ETC. But first, Tony, can you talk a little about yourself? How did you come into the hobby and what do you do?
So I've been in Flames of War since version 1. I got into it very early. Started my first tournament was about over 20 years ago. Used to run just American pairs back then. That was all I played back then. Mid-war or late war, didn't matter. I went to my first ETC. It was the second time in Serbia when they did back-to-back. I think it was 2013, 2012 maybe, somewhere time around there. Took a couple years off. Kids and family life will do that for you sometimes. And then I've been back. I'm usually the one who runs the pairing process for Team USA and makes sure that the guys get the matchups they either want or that I want them to want. So, and then we go from there.
Yeah, and that's the reason why we ended up talking. We stayed at the same hotel this year at ETC, and we had some interesting conversations about the matchup process, because it's one of the things that makes ETC different, right? It's not just you get assigned an opponent and you pick a stance and then you go from there. The ETC has a very special matchup process. It's teams of 6. And how does the matchup process at the ETC work, Tony?
So just to start on the why ETC, for me, the first year I went, I was hooked. Like I just love the team part of it. Like we're in a hobby where even at individual tournaments, you might walk around and you're rooting for somebody, maybe sometimes, but that's just to push you further up the table. And ETC is very different in that you're rooting for 5 other guys, not because somebody else's demise will do good for you, but simply because you're on a team. And as a guy who grew up playing all team sports, and that was it, it was huge. So then you have 6 lists and you got to figure out, well, how are they going to play each other? And ETC has a process set up. And you can get online and find it or whatnot. But basically, it's just a team nominates somebody, like a list hidden. And then the other team counters it with 2. And then the team that nominated first gets to pick which of those 2 they're playing it against. So there's a lot of strategy involved in team composition and how you're going to approach that. And some teams do a lot of prep work. And then in our conversations at the hotel, I found out some teams do absolutely no prep work for that process.
Really?
So, but I think in the end, there's still always, because I know we talked a lot. Your guys' goal was to get a win for each individual guy. And there's even ways without prep to make that happen in the pairings process. So,
yeah. But so, how do you prepare as a team? Is it you say you're the guy in charge of the pairing project, but how do the team decide, and what's the most important thing you can do when you prepare for this system of picking your opponent? We know that you're not building 6 lists that can do everything.
no.
You get the chance to pick. So how do you prepare for the matchup process? Do you sit and analyze your opponents, or there's a lot of teams so you don't even know who you can play?
So like the last month we went, and it was late war. And I think late war is such a flushed out period that we kind of knew going in what to expect. And that's the first step, in my opinion, is develop an idea of what people are going to bring. Like, I don't know exactly that Soren's going to bring this list, but I know that this list is going to be very common at the event. And I've seen you guys write some articles on the website breaking down what's expected and not. And as a team, that's where we start. It's not necessarily that we made the exact list that everybody's going to bring, because that doesn't matter what support platoons are picked here or there. It's just about the style of list that you're going to see. Like there's going to be a Berlin infantry German defend list, and you've got to get through 80 stands of infantry. Just expect it. So you start with what are the problems, and then you can either choose to bring the problems, or you can choose to bring lists that are answers to the problems. And it's kind of got to be a mixture of both on a solid team, because generally the problem lists are the ones that can kind of face just about everything. Yeah. So you do need some lists that can do that, but then if you can manipulate the pairing process properly, bringing the counter lists is also a huge step up.
Yes, that's one of the things, because you could, when you know the matchup, you know, of course, game 1, you'll know who you face. Game 2, you only have a half an hour to prep, and then day 2, you'll know your third game. You get all night to prepare. So how do you do this if you have a counter list? So, for example, Berlin infantry, you have built the perfect counter to that. How do you ensure in the matchup process that you're going to face? You can do the matchup so you won't get 6 good matchups, I assume, but you'll try to get an advantage and get more than half good matchups. How do you do that, and how are you prepared to change during the match process if it doesn't go your way? How do you adjust and fix that?
So it comes down, in my opinion, like a good cook doesn't use bad ingredients. So you have to first bring the right ingredients. And that might not, just because you might love potatoes doesn't mean that's the only thing you're eating for dinner. You want to make sure that you're bringing everything for the meal. So for us, like, we knew in late war that Berlin infantry, like just the static German defend lists, were going to be a problem. So we didn't just build one counter list to it. We brought 3 ready for it. So then one of those 3 guys was going to get that matchup. There just was almost no way for the other team to avoid it. And our process, we don't try, as you mentioned, we don't try for 6 wins. It might happen. It rarely ever happens, to be honest. We've had conversations like after the first round pairings are done of how many wins do you think each team's going to get? Like, a lot of guys were throwing out, they're going to win all 6. And I was just like, nobody's going to win 6 wins. It's not going to happen, guys. So just settle down. Even if it's a top level team against a bottom level team, you're not going to win all 6 games. So we strive for 4 wins around. And then that's all if we get 4 wins, we're great. If we win the round, that's all that matters to us. Because inevitably we're going to be facing all the teams we're competing with for where we want to be throughout the event. So as long as we just beat them each round, then we should be all right. So our strategy is just get 4 wins. And depending on them, I mean, the eras are different. So like late war, you approach it a little differently than you will mid war. But like for late war, we focused on let's get 2 wins against both their defenders, because we kind of figured that's where the strength of a team is that the defend lists can be so strong in late war to, if nothing else, prevent you from getting a win. They might not win themselves, but they will definitely prevent you from getting a win. So we wanted to excel on getting those wins. And we brought...
How do you do that?
So we brought... Igor played the Night Attack Soviet-style list, which we found was a really good way of dealing with the static lists. We also figured some other teams might bring it, but they didn't. No, we were the only ones who brought it. So then we figured a lot of teams are going to practice against it and see how it works, and then find out our defenders can't play that list. And so that you can use as a bully in the pairing process to kind of force them to pick something else. And we had a couple lists ready right there beside him to face that. So that's how we usually ensured a matchup that we wanted against the defenders.
Yeah. So during the matchup process, how often do you talk to your team? Are you like 100% in charge and they just wander off and wait and see what what happens and which matchups they get, or do they stand next to you and are ready to get inputs, or do you ask them, can you beat this? Can you not beat this? Would you prefer something else? Or is that all sorted out to begin with?
All of the above is the correct answer to that.
Okay.
I would love input sometimes, and then I'll turn around and I'll ask, and they're off talking to somebody else, socializing at the event. And it's like, all right, well then, like, because as the pairing process works through, as you know, you get to a point where you have two lists that are facing two of their lists, and you have to make that choice. Yeah. And sometimes our spreadsheet numbers don't say which is the best choice because they have the same numbers for both of them. So then it's about fine tuning and saying, okay, which one do you really want to face? And asking, and if I'm not one of those cards, I'm always asking the guys as long as they're nearby. Sometimes they're just not. So then we have to figure it out and make the guess.
Yeah.
But I do. So we do a lot of prep before with the spread. We have a spreadsheet and the guys go over the lists, figure out how likely they are to beat it or not, and then put a number into the spreadsheet for us. And then I use that information to do the pairings. Okay. A lot of the number, if we've done our job right, before we even see the other team's lists, I should know what the numbers are.
Okay.
They've been practicing these set styles. We haven't been thrown off by what people are bringing, and we're ready for whatever is being brought. And in that situation, then the numbers should say what the numbers are. And now we got to get practice games in because maybe they brought a support platoon we weren't expecting, and it might just slightly change how that list plays. And now we have to practice against it and confirm the numbers.
Okay. Cool. This year there was a lot of talk about stances, if we should play hidden stances or open stances. As in, when you put down a card, you won't know which stance this card will play. That would be a hidden stance. And you could put down showing which stance it would have. That is an open stance. So how does that influence the process you go through when you do the matchup? Like, I assume it'd be easier if you know which stance a certain army or a certain list have. It's easier, or does it matter to you if it's open or closed stances?
So as far as what other teams have, I don't care. I'll find out. And a lot of teams don't change their stances for players throughout the event. And I don't think I'm letting any secrets out here because I think everyone knows it, but we don't keep the same stances for ourselves throughout the event. So for us, I prefer to have hidden stances so that round they don't know what we've got.
Yeah. It makes it easier. It becomes a kind of poker, right?
Yes, very much so. I would prefer it. Like the pairings process is fairly straightforward and most teams know what they're doing. But what I would love is for the teams that have the ability and the willingness to work ahead of time to make a list that can do an attack and maneuver or a maneuver and defend and like try and work hard to get to find those lists to have an advantage in that situation. Then you'll always still have the advantage, but if the stances are revealed before the pairings are made, then it's just obvious.
Yes.
The other thing I noticed that I didn't really like is that, like, when we had mid-war the second time in Belgium and stances were revealed ahead of time, we found teams quite often, if our list was a defend stance, throwing a defend stance against it, forcing us. Now, you can still do that with the assumption that that might be a defend stance. But if we're changing stances to protect ourselves from that, you can't guarantee it. So that's where I don't like it as much. I also don't like the revealed stances ahead because what can happen then is you can build a list for defend versus defend that cannot at all, as a defend list, face attack because deep reserves are going to screw it so bad. And with revealed stances, it just benefits the team that's being a little lazy there. in my opinion, of, well, we couldn't find a second defender, or a guy nobody wants to do it, so we're just going to play you in the defend stance, and you're going to get a defend matchup every time.
Yeah.
Like that, that's where it gets a little lazy in my mind. So I don't like giving those teams that advantage.
That's fair. When you do the matchup process, of at ETC, a certain number is used every round. So you can't get all missions. You can't play the same mission over and over again. Certain missions drop out. Because when you do the extended matrix in round 1, for example, maybe number 3 will go. So all missions under number 3 will disappear. So during the event, some missions will disappear. How does that impact your choice when you match up? Do you keep an eye on it, which missions are available, or do you just don't care at all?
We care very much. We have a spreadsheet that tracks where the guys that are in a specific stance are wanting, like the missions they like, the missions they don't like, in different grids. And then as the numbers get pulled, we keep track of that. So that, like, say they had a 4 down on that matchup as a defender, but now they've got, of the 3 missions left, 2 of them are ones they don't want to play in that grid square, then we're probably knocking that number down a little bit and trusting that number a little less. Okay. Yeah, what missions are left is huge.
So does that influence when you do lists that have the capability of both maneuvering and defending, or attacking and maneuvering? Is that part of the thought process behind doing multiple stance lists, so you can negate that you end up having bad missions left on the matrix? Do you understand?
For the most part, I understand. So your question is the flipping of stances based off what missions are left, or is there something else?
Yeah.
And for us, something else, because we want to almost always avoid just the same stance missions, because they tend to draw so often, especially at ETC. We try and avoid those, and then we want somebody at the table to have a win.
Yeah.
And we trust our guys to get the win.
Yes, and you do rather well, right? One last question here. When you do the matchups, do you take the personality and play styles of the players you got on the team? Do you take that into consideration? Is some people better suited for being thrown under the bus, as we call it? Like, you get bad matchup repeatedly, and then most likely won't get a win. Do you look at all on the players and say, we need somebody who wins now because they had a hard time? Or is everybody in on that? You might lose all 6 games, but you win as a team?
Yes to all of that, and then some extra. There are definitely guys that cannot handle losing, no doubt about it. They just don't see it very often in Flames of War. That's why they're on our team, because they don't lose much. So we try and make sure, like, there are some guys that have been on the team for a long time that understand. We try not to ever put a new guy to the team, because we just don't know. Like, if you've never been to the ETC, we don't know how you're going to handle the team aspect of it, so we don't put the new guys in positions that often to be thrown under the bus. But more importantly, we've been here enough. We know some of the players really well for the other countries to say some of them are hotheads at times, and like to argue extensively would not be an understatement. So we try and get our guys that argue a lot not against them too. There's many facets of, like, we focus heavily on every aspect of how to pair. And it's not just, is this list good against this list? Like, we have an idea of who's more than likely to get into sudden death in every game on other teams. And we have an idea of, on our team, who are the faster players and who are the slower players. And we try to avoid that too. Because because I do feel that sudden death games are so limiting in what you can do once you're in sudden death. And I strongly feel that if a guy is in sudden death every round, then there should be something done about that at the event. Because I've watched games where other teams' defenders are in round 3 or turn 3 at the same time that our defenders are in turn 6 or turn 7 across all 6 tables. Like it's almost become a strategy at times. And it's a little frustrating because we don't do that as a country ourselves. So if I get done early and I'm walking around, part of it is just getting those guys that are in those situations to like just regroup, figure it out. We practice sudden death, figure out how to push the needle the right way, so to speak.
Yeah. Hurry up.
But yeah, as far as player analysis, it's not just can you handle being thrown under the bus. There's a lot to it for us.
Okay. Well, thank you, Tony, for taking time to answer my questions. It's been a pleasure, and hopefully people have enjoyed seeing that there's more to ETC matchups than just making the right list and predicting the stance of your opponent. And then there you go. Because US does it differently. They consider a lot more, and they apparently do pretty well. So thank you.
Well, we try. Thank you.